Welcome once again to Syntax Error, your pretentious philosophical pedantic podcast ostensibly about video gaming and related topics therein. Warning, this podcast contains mature language, content, and spoilers. You have been warned. Welcome back to a short special of Syntax Error. I am Leon Kennedy, aka Scott Thurlow, joined today by Barry Burton, aka J. Ian Manzer.
Watch out, or you'll be a Jill sandwich.
Yes. And as you may have gathered, we're doing a sort of a quick retrospective on Resident Evil since it is the 20th anniversary of the franchise this year. Actually, it was back in March, so we're kind of trying to play a bit of a catch-up. But just, Ian and I will sit here and discuss sort of the impact, the legacy of it as a franchise series and on games, also its tentacles into other medium eventually, and sort of our own personal experiences with the series. So, Barry, what was your first Resident Evil game?
Well, I rented Resident Evil.
The original?
Yeah, from Blockbuster, back when that existed.
Right.
Yeah. And I remember, for PlayStation 1, was it?
Yes.
And it was unlike anything back in the day that were fantastic graphics.
Yeah, sure.
I believe it started with FMV video footage or some type of video.
It was
footage.
definitely
real actors
a cutscene, I believe.
involved
Yeah.
with it. And it was revolutionary at the time. It looks atrocious nowadays.
Sure.
But there was voice acting.
Yep.
There, it was a kind of an introduction to what PlayStation could do at the time.
Sure, they were showing off, what the new system could do. And yeah, I agree. Like, yes, back then you hadn't seen much of that, if any at all. Probably, I would say Resident Evil definitely was one of the first franchises to start using it more at the time. My first game actually was 2 for the N64. And similarly, like, it wasn't quite, I guess I want to say most games I'd played were fun, sunny, like Mario games, and like Zelda, sure, but this one was a dark, scary game.
Yes.
That sort of got to me. I liked it, and it sort of stuck with me. I ever since then, I searched for games that could sort of impart that atmosphere, and certainly Resident Evil did at the beginning, and they, of course, we'll talk about it a bit later on, went off the rails. However...
Well, the original competitor to the PlayStation was the N64,
right.
Correct?
Yeah.
So that was totally aimed at children.
Sure.
Where, again, Resident Evil showed that like this was
you can make a more
for grown-ups.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that, and I remember it being hard, of course, and the big complaint, of course, looking back on it, is that both in 1, it wasn't until 4 that they fixed this problem, but yeah, it had great atmosphere, and it was interesting, and the characters could be interesting, even though some of the voice acting might not have been, but it was so hard to see where you were shooting, where that was the problem.
Well, it was famous for its weird camera angles,
yes,
particularly.
Of course, yeah. That's also a legacy that thankfully they eventually did away with. But sure, I remember like getting lost, getting turned around in corridors, and it was cool sort of on the surface at first, but then you start thinking to yourself, it's kind of annoying that I have to navigate the room in such a way.
Well, it's weird because it seems that Resident Evil revolutionized what games could be, and then got stuck in that mode while other games were moving past it.
Exactly. I definitely agree with that. So I think we had a little thing precast that they sort of had a rivalry kind of with Silent Hill. Mm-hmm. Like they're two kind of horror games. They were both like around the same time, I believe. I think I have Silent Hill came out. The first Resident Evil came out in 96. I don't have the year on Silent Hill, but I believe it was like plus or minus 1. It was really close.
It was close.
And they were sort of like doing the a very microcosm example of a console war. They're doing it like a horror war.
But it was also but to that point about the horror war, it was specifically dealing with the two types really of horror that exist.
Exactly, that's what I'm getting at. Go ahead.
Resident Evil was jump scares and action oriented with a plot that doesn't make much sense.
Right.
Where Silent Hill had action, but it was more about escaping enemies and the atmosphere and the slow buildup of tension. So they're really complete. You can see that battle go on in horror film constantly today, or through the whole history of horror film. So this was the video game version of that.
Yep, no, exactly. I agree with that. And so it's interesting to see, how each one took horror as a template, but how they used it. Of course, as you just said, Resident Evil is just more action-y. Yeah. Whereas Silent Hill is atmosphere. But even so, this is my personal example. I may have mentioned this on other casts, but in 2, there was a boss. He wasn't a boss. He was a character, essentially, named Mr. X. Yes, very clever enemy name. But it was still... I remember it being quite scary because it wasn't quite a jump scare. He would just sort of appear. Like you'd solve a puzzle or whatever and come out of a room and he would be there. But he'd be just standing there at first and then start slowly moving towards you. And you could run away. And if he caught you, like, you're probably dead. But it would just had this sort of stalking nature to it, which I thought was really cool.
Well, onto that, I played Resident Evil 1, 2, Nemesis. I played 4 a little bit. I didn't own that one, so it was more of.
We'll talk about 4 in a bit, but
atmosphere, like building off of or understanding from watching others and playing at friends' houses.
Right.
I also played a spin-off of I came after maybe 3, which was a rail shooter version that was awful.
Yeah, I remember that too.
That kind of broke it for me. I stopped really playing Resident Evil around Code Veronica when that came out, and then I went and bought 5 strictly for the co-op nature.
Yeah, and you and I played it together that year, and we'll talk about 5 too. But sure, I
want to go back to the original point about you said the stalking nature. That's what I liked about Nemesis. This is actually an interesting unintended game mechanic. So Nemesis would chase you and hunt you down throughout the entire game.
Right.
And you could beat him by spending all the ammunition you had to defeat him. But there's a point where I was low on ammo, I was low on health, and I went into a save room, which had one entrance and exit, and saved my game. And he couldn't follow you to save rooms, but he hung outside of it. So the minute I walked out the door, he would kill me. So I had saved over my game, so I was literally stuck with nothing I could do. I had to restart the game. Yeah, so that's an interesting little element that you don't think of. But I kind of, to bring up the Silent Hill comparison, Nemesis was very similar to the Pyramid Head from Silent Hill, except it's really demonstrated the difference there, where you had one character that would hunt you down and action-oriented, very quickly go after you, and kind of brute force his way through. With Nemesis, you had the Pyramid Head who was uncomfortable to look at, who would just drag this noisy thing and slowly pursue you, and you really never could defeat it. So it's an interesting parallel between the two.
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's a good point. I didn't actually quite think about it, but it makes sense that I guess you could say Mr. X is sort of like that. But sure, just if not unkillable, you're gonna have to sink a lot of resources into it. And Resident Evil, amongst many other things that had impact on, is known for resource management, right? Which we can talk about the inventory system, sure. And I believe the ribbons was a very famous thing that it was almost a resource unto itself, at least in 2, because there were a limited amount of them. So you had to pick and choose your saves. You couldn't just waste saves here and there. And I remember that sort of being, whether intentionally or not, or it's weird because that certainly added sort of a layer of unease to the games.
Yes.
On top of the.
And I actually kind of missed that. A little bit because it's something you don't think about anymore. With the idea of quick saves whenever you want.
Exactly. Yeah, it takes away some of the tension, I guess I would say, and that's sort of I think it probably would lose something a bit if you were able to save whenever you wanted to without using a limited resource to do so. But sure. So I will talk about 4 a bit because I did play it, and 4 is actually widely regarded as one of the as the best Resident Evil and just one of the greatest horror games ever made. As I recall, when I read a review of it a long time ago, it was something like, you don't play Resident Evil 4, it plays you. It's like the Smirnoff thing. But I liked it in this way because it was everything you sort of had the trappings of a Resident Evil, but it was revolutionary for the fact that it introduced the over-the-shoulder view. That was the perfect change, the perfect addition to have to a Resident Evil game. It made it so much easier, just smoother, and also they had the laser pointer, so now you could see where you were going and move freely about the map, which it was pretty big too. It was not as sectional as 1, 2, and Nemesis were. So it had a kind of more of a tongue-in-cheek plot than Resident Evil may have before that, but it was just so much fun. And even though it came out later on, so I was older, I'll give you one little anecdote story that it still managed to scare me without a jump scare or anything, because those ones really no longer scare anymore. Sure, the dog jumps through the window, whatever, you've seen that. But I was going through the hedge maze in the castle at that part, and the one cool thing, I think we spoke a bit about this in our soundtracks episode, but when there were enemies around, there was a moaning, a constant moaning. When you cleared an area, that stopped. So I was going around clearing it, and I didn't see anybody, but I could still hear the moaning. So I was like, all right, I know this motherfucker's somewhere. And I was checking around every corner of every hedge maze and part of the hedge maze, and I just let my guard down for 1 second, and of course the one when I did that and I turned around, he was right there in my face, and I jumped back, and I was like, it still managed to get me, even though that wasn't a scripted thing. He was just, the enemy happened to be there, and I had to clear him out. So yeah, they still can be effective in that sense, even though they sometimes maybe went over the top with it.
Over the top?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Over the top, back around and lapped themselves.
So I hadn't played Resident Evil in a while. The movies were coming out at this point.
Yeah.
So I picked up Resident Evil 5 when it first came out. Strictly for the co-op thing. I liked playing games when I was younger. Co-ops out in the room, with a friend. You don't see that very often anymore.
I think just before you go on, I think that may have been one of the last games to actually have local co-op.
Yeah. So I picked it up, and Resident Evil 5, I dislike it, but not for the racism, not for the...
Well, in addition to the racism?
Yeah, in addition, but that didn't offend me as much as there was the controversy around it.
Sure.
And I tend to be kind of the first person to, even like when there's not call something racist. Yeah. I don't think it was intentional, and no,
it wasn't. It was just a poor decision amongst many other poor decisions that you're about to tell us about in 5.
But what offended me was that the last battle of that game was, I'm in a volcano fighting a muted Albert Wesker.
Yeah.
It had jumped the shark and then was now beating the shark to death so it could drag it and jump over it some more.
It's dead corpse, yes. It's T-virus infected corpse, yes. Sure.
Yeah, they had the T-virus shark in one.
Yeah, exactly. They had already done it. But sure, like, it's sort of known for being over the top. But it wasn't quite that at first, but it quickly did become that. Yeah. And I think they sort of embraced it, like Capcom knew that. And it was by Shinji Mikami, right? So it's like his vision and so forth. He's sort of like Kojima of the Resident Evil series. So he was, behind the scenes driving it. And like I said, eventually he became self-aware, maybe. But I was going to say what offended me about 5 was not all that. It was just being a bad game. Like, it was just poorly designed. The inventory system was the worst. We agreed upon absolutely. That. So, without wishing to delve into it too deeply, it was just terrible. It made no sense. Less sense than they had ever made. And it was just annoying to deal with. So I don't know. And plus, this was not interesting. It could have been interesting, sure. In Africa, blah, 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 and stuff's happening. But like you said, I'm fighting a Bond. I have a Bond villain fight at the end of that game. Great.
No, I'm not fighting a Bond. It's way more than a Bond villain fight.
Right.
It's going into...
Sure, okay.
Like, if Austin Powers in spoofing Bond tried to do that, people would be like, that's way too ridiculous for... I kind of want to work for the Umbrella Corporation.
Oh, I always have said that, sure. They're like the poster corporation for inexplicably corrupt corporations for no reason. Like, doing all... Like, here's a question, right, that's been asked and we can ask ourselves now. What is it that Umbrella is getting out of all of this stuff? It's certainly not profits, I would think.
Well,
they're just in it for the evils, really.
What happens is you don't understand the main goal.
Okay.
It's the CEO of Umbrella doesn't have money invested in Umbrella. He has money invested in a contracting company. That it's like Dick Cheney.
All right.
Yeah, with Halliburton. He's not interested in being vice president. He's interested in funneling no contract bids to build underground bases.
Okay.
In all parts of the world.
They certainly have enough of those.
Yeah, exactly. He's making a killing off of that.
I guess, but then like, why zombies then? So again, like, just for the hell of it, as well. Might as well fuck it. I'm in it for the evils.
Well, like, we've already built 3 bases. We're not going to want any more. Well, if we put a zombie infestation, we'll have to build a new base in Antarctica.
Yeah, I guess.
Great.
I mean, it's a good scheme, but I still never quite understood their, step 1, zombies and underground bases. Step 2, step 3, profit, I guess.
Yes.
But no, it's always been a bit ridiculous. But nevertheless, I still think its legacy is still legitimate. Mm-hmm. That it you could see its influence in many games that have come out in generations after that, even if it itself sort of lapsed back into
parody.
If not that, then like blandness sometimes. Even like when I try to get ridiculous with the plot, it no longer becomes like amusingly over the top. It just becomes trying too hard or something like that to me. At times it did, but no, that's why I'm saying I think again 2 sort of stands on its own as still a good because it's very narrowly focused, right? That's I think where they start to go awry. It's a small area, it's a small story. 5 is like the whole. Half of Africa is infected and all this other crap's happening.
It moved from Resident Evil to international, yes.
International man of evil.
Yes.
Sure.
So one part I think we failed to mention so far is the nature of the puzzle elements of these games.
Sure, let's touch on that.
Because it's ridiculous.
It's adventure game style stuff, but even more egregious often.
But that's the thing is they can't have the adventure game thing of like, it's adventure game logic mixed with regular world because it's a realized world. So they try to like explain it away in the first couple of games, like, oh, this person's a fan of chess, so he built this convoluted chess board game to unlock all the doors in this place. All right, I guess, and then it just happens. Not only are they building bases everywhere, but they're building complex. It's not just finding key cards. It's
other elaborate
finding
crap. Yeah,
putting statues in the appropriate places and all that.
A shield to fit into a knight statue that turns a door that then you need another key, 2 sets of keys for, whatever. Like, all right, let's just quickly do a couple examples like that. In the first one, you need a dog whistle to call a dog, get its collar, to get like a key. It wasn't a key, it was like a key-shaped thing. Then you could go to a different place, take the key out. A moving wall of spikes would come towards you, but you place the fake key into the thing you just took out. Thus, then now you finally have the key. It's all like crap like that.
Yes.
And in 2, for sure, I know they had the suit key, so like a diamond key, a club key, a spade key. I guess that's how the cops lock up their station, with like card-suited keys.
I feel like they stopped explaining that as they went
Sure,
along.
it was just sort of there afterwards. You just sort of assumed it.
Although I think in 3 they avoided much of the puzzle element, it was at least more realistic.
Right.
Puzzle
I think,
elements.
as I recall, it was more like you had to get codes for doors and stuff like that. So yeah, you still had to do the Resident Evil kind of stuff, but it wasn't. It was based more in logic than it was before.
It's not navigating the MC Escher puzzles.
Yeah, exactly. But sure, I don't know. Like again, it's known for also having mentioned the inventory system. When they made sense, they made sense. It was another mechanic that forced you to think about your decisions, and you couldn't just blow everything away. I mean, you could try, but you probably run out of ammo pretty quickly.
Another thing I liked, I know they did this with the first 2, was the elements of having multiple playthroughs with different characters.
I was about to get to that. Yeah. Sure, that 1 definitely had it, and 2 did too. There was
2 expanded even so that
there was an A and a B, I believe, for both. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and that was interesting. I think I got through 3 out of the 4. Like, I got pretty far with those. Yeah. But again, see, it's almost like those games sort of taught me how to do trial and error in games, because you would get so far, and then you'd either have lost like enough stuff, like you don't have enough herbs or whatever to make it through the next part. So you have to basically, I did many fresh playthroughs of 2 at least to try to get through as far as I can, remembering like, all right, I know a licker's going to come out here. I have to shoot him like in the exact position, and if I miss him, then I'll just restart.
So this thing is, like, games nowadays, even kind of horror games, they hold your hand far too much. That because I think that is considered not like, the fact that forcing your player to restart because they haven't made because they haven't managed their resources enough well, or whatever, is considered negative in games. So now it's more like, we'll make sure you can get through this as long as you're putting in effort to do it.
Sure, like so. I know I reviewed or mentioned that they did Revelations 2 last year around this time, almost exactly a year ago, as I recall. And it was sort of a throwback, like so, but you could see where, like you had just said, where you almost couldn't. They gave you enough stuff that you didn't really have to resource manage. In fact, you had to resource manage what you could, like overflowing junk crap. They had like a token crafting system, which was fine, I guess. But there was almost no way, like the tension from the older games was completely removed. Like, even though it was decently done, like the episodes were fine, and I liked the story well enough, and I think I mentioned that. In fact, you played as Barry Burton, and that one was amusing. Sure, so I mean, it was a nice little throwback, but definitely they tried to have the look and the feel of 2 and 4, but with the modern nature, as you say, like, hey, here's ammo everywhere, really. Like, you can't fail. So I don't know, like, I get it. Like, it's sort of maybe a condition of our instant gratification, moving into that mindset.
Well, I think it's also attempting to appeal to the broadest possible group.
Yes, sure, of course. And
because inherently Resident Evil was risky when it first came out.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
It was tailored to a specific audience, which was the horror audience. Now it's become, you don't go to Resident Evil for horror anymore. You go for action adventure. So it's taking on more of the action adventure elements.
I'll give you another perhaps microcosm you may agree upon in a smaller condensed cycle. Dead Space. The first Dead Space was really, I enjoyed it. It was more of a horror game, but then immediately 2 and certainly 3 just became an action game with like token horror elements. But no, like they wanted to be kind of a new Resident Evil, but very quickly they condensed what Resident Evil had done, their progression into like 3 games instead of 7 or whatever.
But to be fair, when you try to latch on to what you were, you kind of go through the Silent Hill mentality.
Yeah, see,
which is
right.
It's constantly trying to it's not trying to reinvent itself. It's trying to recapture the magic of what came before.
Sure, which can be harder and harder the more you do it each time. I agree with that. But still, nevertheless, I still think certainly it left its mark on the gaming culture and design within horror and within just action adventure in general, since it started to branch out into that too.
So to go back to one of our original points of Resident Evil versus Silent Hill, what do you think had the greater impact?
It's really tough. I would say probably 50-50 because of what you had said about it, that it depends on how you're going to try to do a horror game, right? So you could go basically the Res Evil route or the Silent Hill route and try to like pull elements from both. But I think it's going to be more difficult if you try to cut up the two. You should probably focus on, have a vision and be like, I'm going to do it this way or this way. And whichever one you choose, the influence is still equally there, I think. That's how I would answer that.
I would say that Resident Evil had more of an influence, but just because of
the
its
sheer
style.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Because not style necessarily, but like the gameplay mechanics.
Okay, yeah.
That the idea of an action-oriented horror game is a lot more feasible than... I feel much more difficult to build an atmospheric game that
I agree with that.
Play through an entire game and be scared the entire time.
Sure. I definitely agree with that. You're right about that, I think, in general. So perhaps, it's a little bit easier, like more manageable, I guess, if doing it that way.
Yes.
I agree. And like I said, 4, of course, was sort of, if not invented, then every game after it, every third-person game used that camera style. Like, that was awesome at the time. I don't believe I'd seen that before. Right. And it was perfect for playing that kind of game, and many other games, of course, that weren't necessarily horror games, but were third-person, open-ish action games.
So, and I think that argument says that Resident Evil has pioneered
more things than Silent Hill.
Yes.
Sure. I think Silent Hill is more like beloved for what it did story-wise and like psychologically affecting, but not necessarily design impact. No, I would agree with that. And we mentioned this, so Mikami also did Evil Within, which is sort of a throwback last year or 2 years ago, recently-ish. It was an early-ish game that I got for PS4. And yeah, it was still good. It might as well have been Res Evil, but it was that meant it actually did update a bit of the mechanics as well. There wasn't as much illogical puzzles to solve, and the inventory system was more manageable. There was even an upgrade system, which actually there wasn't 4.2.
Well, I felt that Evil Within went more back. If you were going to compare it to any of the Resident Evils, it returned to like 1 and 2.
Kind of, yeah. 1 for sure. There definitely was a big mansion level and all that. But all I'm saying is, like, you could see. I don't want to say that he plagiarized himself, but certainly he was using the template he was familiar with.
Although I was saying that it stopped trying to do the ridiculous over the top.
Exactly.
Like
kind of
Evil Corporation type.
Sure.
Plot line.
Basically, part of that game, it was all a psychotic dream, so they could, basically explain anything away because it was a dream. But it worked. I guess I want to say well enough.
I agree.
Any other funny things, impacts from it? Here's one. There's an old joke. They reference it a lot. It was even an achievement, I believe. The Master of Unlocking thing, like Leon's the Master of Unlocking. Like it's little tongue-in-cheek humor that they would put in, or the Joe sandwich line that Barry said. There's one. This is such a random thing, but it just happened to be when I was replaying 4 a while ago. They had given out this game called Dust for free, completely unrelated. But if anyone recalls, and if you might recall, when you go to the store guy in Resident Evil 4, he'll say, when we try to sell him stuff, he says something like, I buy it at a high price. It's like something like that. Yeah. So I was going through like this little side-scroller action-y RPG in Dust, and I went to the first store. I'm a little companion. Like, the guy was like, if you have anything to sell, and she interrupts and goes, he'll buy it at a high price. And he goes, yeah, that's right. And I was like, it's such a random reference, but it worked, like little things like that are known here and there. So yeah, even like, it's sort of, if not ubiquitous, it definitely has a larger reach in pop culture because of the movies and all the other tie-ins and crap, even though the quality of them, we can debate that, but it doesn't really matter. It's probably more well known by the general populace outside the video gaming world, I would say.
Well, again, I think that the original title of Biohazard.
Biohazard.
That's a much better name.
Yeah.
Biohazard's a more appropriate title than like Resident Evil.
Sure.
Which is the most resident title of all time. But I don't like Silent Hill has, I think, like 2 or 3 movies attached to it.
At least 1, possibly 2, sure.
But even so, there's 8 or so Resident Evil movies.
So maybe they're still competing like in some way. I get it, but I don't know. Like I certainly can see its impact in other games that I like that weren't even. I would say the Fear series, and especially 2 was my favorite one of that, wouldn't exist, or at least wouldn't be what it was, even though it was an FPS. Still, it had a lot of great atmosphere that I could see being influenced by Res Evil.
What's the game where it's almost a 2D side scroller, and you're like the haunted like hotel type thing, not Alone in the Dark.
Alone in the Dark was first, but
no, it's a small little. It looks like a Nintendo game or something like that.
Oh, Lone Survivor. I think?
Lone Survivor, yeah. Lone Survivor, I feel is very based off of Silent Hill more so than any of those. But there's very few games I feel capture very few American releases that capture the Silent Hill feel. There's like Resident Evil is far more of an American game than it is.
Sure, I definitely agree with that.
Because that idea of like, there's a one game, Fatal Frame, which those are kind of have a very Japanese kind of feel to them.
Yeah, for sure.
Japanese way of doing horror, and Resident Evil is much more like, look at the movies, very American way of doing horror.
No, exactly. I agree with that. So it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, again, even given all of that, all I'm saying is that you can't really deny its influence on games in general. And it certainly informed at least some of my sensibilities when I first played, at least 2, and I had never experienced a game quite like that. And then ever since, I've been looking for things that at least were close enough to it that I would enjoy. So, still quality, it's still chugging along. I believe they're actually remaking 2 this year, and they're also re-releasing for PS4 at least. Not sure about Xbox One, but
I saw an article on 7 being made eventually.
They're ostensibly doing 7 too. But I was going to say they're doing a reverse. They're releasing 4, 5, and 6, but in a weird reverse order. So 6 first, like the redux basically of 6, and then 5, and I'll probably get 4. I'll probably play. It'd be nice to play 4 on a new gen. Yeah, but I think I'll skip 5 and 6.
I actually think that the best thing for the Resident Evil franchise right now would be a reboot.
I agree. I'm surprised they haven't done it yet. Sure, they just basically spit out the remakes, but that's just basically putting a
return to Raccoon City.
Yeah, a nice, fresh-looking can of paint on the originals, but I think they could do well with something like that. It would be a good idea. I would like to see it. Whether or not they will.
Before they fall down the Metal Gear rabbit hole of needing to play all the games to understand what the hell's going on in the plotline. I mean, granted, the shallowest look at the plotline is zombies.
Yes.
But there's so much backstory. It almost feels like it's turned into a comic book series.
I mean,
where almost all the recurring villains have been established 2 decades ago.
It might as well be at this point. Like we mentioned a couple other characters, like Ada Wong. Yeah. She's not necessarily a villain. She's sort of like mysterious spy shows up, and like Leon's first with her and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of potential to do kind of a reboot thing that old school fans would like, but would be accessible to the modern audience. Sure. And
returning to its roots, it can rediscover itself. It can rediscover because
that.
Right now it has to just keep building off of what it already is, which it's ridiculous. And
sure. Ironically, Resident Evil has become a monster within itself, and it just has to keep going, keep mutating, if you will. Sure.
Or it just needs to start sticking all the needles into it and become the most ridiculous game of all time. Yeah. But
either way, I mean, I still have fond enough memories of it, and certainly you can give it the respect it deserves for its influence on games, even if it started to go a little off the rails eventually.
Well, we forgot to mention this part. When Resident Evil first came out, like anything successful, like Deadpool recently came out, so there's going to be 1,000 Deadpool clones come out. There were 1,000 Resident Evil clones that came out. My favorite one was Dino Crisis because it was we can't do zombies. Let's do dinosaurs.
Sure,
we're still going to have like the whole plot was like they had a way to steal dinosaurs from over time.
Yes.
So and that went off the rails to
obviously.
Like the second one, everyone went to they accidentally set the city back into the prehistoric era, and the third one was in space. Yeah. So
dinosaurs in space, of course. But I mean, no, you're right. When something comes out that is new and fresh, then sure there'll be copycats, and then you can see like which ones are able to be original enough while building upon the progenitor of it.
Yes.
But sure, I know I agree with all that. And again, like I said, 4 is still the best, and they're also doing a remake of 2. Which I'm debating getting. Like we said, I have fond memories of it, but if they do it like a very close sticking to the original, am I gonna still hate now the camera angles and so forth? I'll probably try to give it a playthrough, but I may not finish it if it comes out. Is all I'm saying. But either way, I certainly still can respect it to a large degree, if not respecting its plot and so forth, respecting again its impact on design and my formative years of playing games.
Also, Parasite Eve. Was I don't think it's a 100% a ripoff because
it's somewhat a spiritual successor. Maybe you could say.
Dino Crisis, as you said, it was Resident Evil with dinosaurs, but Parasite Eve wasn't really Resident
Evil.
Not
quite, but sure.
Still, Resident Evil allowed it to exist.
Exactly,
that was a good game. I think that they should do a Resident Evil Dino Crisis crossover with zombie dinosaurs.
All right. Well,
I don't think they did that yet.
No, but we should make that game. Yes. We're calling it now. Capcom, if you do it, you owe us money.
Resident dinosaurs?
Yes, exactly. Dinosaur Evil. Right, that's my pitch. But sure, no, got anything else to say about Res Evil? Basically, we're just giving a salute for its 20th year anniversary, and check it out. Still, go back and play 4 or 2, if you haven't played it in a while, and they're still enjoyable.
Yeah, I think my favorite one was Nemesis. That had the most impact on me. But yeah, there were. It's like going back and watching like 80s horror movies.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing like them appears now, but there's still something to them. So
no, I agree. So till then, we'll be in Raccoon City, being eaten by zombies. Right. I'm Leon Kennedy, a.k.a. Scott Thurlow, and I've been here with Barry Burton, a.k.a. Jane Manzer.
Resident Evil.
Good night. This has been Syntax Error. Thank you as always for listening, and we will see you next time.
Music by Stephen Armosi. Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow.
Syntax Error is part of a Lost Signals Productions. All rights reserved.